Here we go. Don't worry, this isn't just an Ammon and Ammon's Bogus Hangout this week. Bill is just about to jump back in. He just had to take a phone call. And I'm joined by the first time in a film strip for me, Vincent Messina. So hello, Vincent.
Hello.
So, Kristin is in the middle of getting updates on her PC because you know how Windows likes to do these things. It doesn't tell you there's any updates until there's something you really want to do, at which time it decides to update everything at once. So hopefully Kristin will be jumping in a little bit later. Bill will be coming in now, but I will be putting the live link into the event so that anybody who wants to jump in with us can. Meanwhile, Vince, tell me, and I know you hate being called Vince, but
I don't like
it's got to be done once, you know, because Vince, that's how we do it in England. Vin, very American. Vince in England.
Yeah, people call me Vin, or a lot of other things that have nothing to do with my name. But Vince always just sort of reminded me of like an American pimp, and I'm not really a pimp, so technically.
Okay, yeah. Vin, we have one Vinny in the UK, which of course was Vinnie Jones, the footballer who then went into movies. But yeah, Vince is just the traditional.
Now, growing up, people call me Vinny, but then as I got older, everybody just wants to, who knows, call me Vince. Todd does it just to bust my chops.
Yeah, Todd does most things just to bust your chops. Let's face it.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm convinced he sort of got a hypnotic spell on me where I literally wake up in the middle of the night and scream Todd in a cold sweat. My wife wants to know if I'm having an affair with somebody named Todd. I said no.
Oh, so you're still denying it so far. Okay, so I'll tell you what. Tell me about your week. What have you been up to this week? What's a week for Vincent Messina look like?
So outside, we got about 4 feet of snow, so within 10 days. So that's been pretty busy. Inside and online, I wrote that fairly lengthy expose on authorship and how it's gained. That took a lot of my time, plus the following up on some of the social activity. And then I had some client work to do. I then wrote a book review, and then here I am today, on top of all the different little mini discussions that go on in and around Google+.
Yeah. I've been aware of some of those. I remember the thing about gaming the book reviews, of course, because I jumped in on that, and I remember quite a few people were sort of really amazed because you wrote this straight up, very good, really in-depth piece. What struck me was how organised it was compared to what I'm used to of you, which is the social stream, where you're kind of and another comment and another comment sometimes in a row, and it was just like, wow, look at that, he's thought of this in advance. Wow.
You know, since you put it that way, I'm going to go now. No. Well,
I think I was talking about you behind your back.
Yeah, no. The thing is that when the blog comes out like that, you know, you're building a case, and so there's a method to it. There's an argument, assertion, and then you got evidence to prove it. When you're in a comment stream, one of the reasons why you see a lot of me comment and then comment and then comment is because I'll comment and then go, oh, I forgot something. And I go and comment again. I'm trying to control it, but it's kind of hard to rein in this beast, so to speak.
So is that sometimes impatience? Because I know I kind of get that sometimes. I try to hold back from comment until I've thought about it and then know everything I want to say. And then if someone else comes up after that, I go, screw it. I'll wait until somebody else has commented and then follow up.
So you're a student of human psychology, so I know it just for kicks and giggles. But there's that whole emotional center, and then there's the intellect. And I think they call it the amygdala, right? That emotional core. So there's a delay in most normal human beings. There's somewhat of a delay between the two. Mine is about 4 days. So I have my emotional response, and then 4 days goes by, And I'm trying to get that down to 3 days, but every once in a while it goes to 6 days. So it's a real struggle. When I sort of read that and discovered that there is even such a thing as that delay, I cracked up laughing, saying, "Well, yeah, there you go." So that explains it all. Yeah, it's impulse, for sure. Particularly if I'm passionate about whatever it is that's going on. Yes.
Yeah, we said about Todd likes to bust your chops, and he's giving you a handy hashtag there, Pimp My Sales Techniques. Yeah, well, I think you could write an ebook on that. I think that'd be good.
Pimp My Sales Techniques. There you go.
It's got to be linked into plus your business, hasn't it? Let's face it. Pimp my business. There you go. Hijack his whole BYB thing. So
I feel so vulnerable right now. I'm just waiting for the Irishman to weigh in at some point too.
Oh,
stabbing me in the face.
He's bound to be along.
I think you could write an ebook on that.
Okay, who's got the delay on? Bill, you watching us on video again?
There you go.
It's got to be
We've got the time limit.
plus your business, isn't it?
Yeah, okay. So, still no Kristin at the moment. Bill, what have you been up to the past week? I'll give Vincent a little bit of a break to catch his breath and realise that you're the nice one. He doesn't meet many of them.
I'm trying to get my car through the smog test. I didn't know there was a smog test in California, but it seems like there is. And so my car's out roaming the freeways of California trying to reduce the amount of emissions it outputs, according to the mechanic who's working on it and trying to help me.
Okay.
I think he just wants to ride around in the car for a day or two.
What car you got, Bill?
I have a Mercury Sable. It's a nice car, but
But not maybe the cleanest in output. These days they're getting quite ridiculous. I mean, over here in Europe, we have got smaller cars anyway, and some of them, you sometimes feel like you're driving around in a glorified trainer, you know, a running shoe, because they seem to get smaller, stranger shaped, and more colourful all the time. And I'm always expecting to see a Nike swoosh on the side of some of these cars.
yeah, the smart cars look like they barely can fit two people.
That is exactly what they're like. You occasionally see one on a motorway and you think, oh, God, you're hopeful. Yeah, I've barely got enough speed there to stay in the slow lane, never mind the fast lane.
You can fit two of them in a normal parking spot? Yeah.
They say, but you can't. Yeah, mind you, maybe that's the American version, and you probably fit two in the size of an American car.
What do you do when you have to go to the grocery store?
Well, a lot of the cars here are the same as the soccer mum wagons over there. You know, there's a lot of MPVs, multi-passenger vehicles, a lot of Citroen and Renault type ones. We don't like those as much. You know, my partner's two favourite cars for doing the shopping runs were, she had a Mazda for a while, which is, you know, a sporty saloon. She loved that, and a Volvo, which she loved for its comfort and reliability.
What part of the UK do you live?
Well, I'm on the south coast, so we always joke, you know, that everywhere's called London because that's the way most Americans see it. You know, oh yeah, he lives near London. Doesn't matter where you live, you know. But it kind of is. You know, I'm 60 miles from London as the crow flies, pretty much. It's an hour on the train.
I've been once, and I've got a long, long story I'll document for you someday, but suffice it to say, it took me 6 hours to get from Heathrow to Shakespeare's Town. And there was the reason I flew in was for business, but I wasn't informed that Stratford-upon-Avon, I think it is so far away from Heathrow, until I got to the cab stand and I handed him my address, and he says that's about $1,000 cab ride.
Huh.
And at that point I realized I was in a little bit of trouble. But the funniest part of the whole story is that no matter I was in there's a train station outside of Heathrow about 15 minutes away, and I don't know the name. It's a big train station. It was rush hour on a Monday morning. I'm 6'2", 240 pounds. I had a big luggage bag because I was going to be staying for a week, and I'm in a train station at rush hour with all these people from London who are in a place or not, banging into me all over the place. I could not find anybody who spoke in English that I recognized so that they could advise me on how to get to where I was going. Until it was your version of a police officer that finally gave me, some semblance of advice in a variety of English that I could actually comprehend.
Yeah.
But that saga was a 6.5-hour saga.
Yeah, you see, to us, we know Stratford-on-Avon. That's a different part of the country. It's kind of like the north and south divide in the US. Yeah, you'd landed in ours is reverse. Our south is like your northern states, and our northern states are like your southern ones. They're the ones we think are not quite all there and very backwards. So you've landed in the south, and you want to go pretty much to up north. Yeah, that cabbie was absolutely right about how much that was going to cost you.
The funniest moment was I'm totally lost. I'm trying to get someplace, and I go to what was designated as information. So there's a kid behind the window. I hand him the address, and he looks. I said, I just need to know how to get there. And he goes through some book, and he looks at me, and he goes, "Well, it says you're here." And I said, "Let me get this straight. You're telling me you're from this country, and you think that address is here?" He says, "Well, yeah." I'm like, I gotta go. I gotta go find someone else. This was information. He was the guy that was supposed to give me information, and he thought that this train station was where I was supposed to be going.
Yeah.
No good.
Yeah. So I get my share of it as well. Hold up. Yeah. Well, I have to do the time traveler thing. You see, it's just part of the whole thing. And besides, Todd, I wanted the universe to be speaking to me. I thought that was important this week. So, how much are they trying to charge you for fixing your car, Bill?
I think like $300. It'll supposedly pass the smog test. So.
It depends what they got to do. That's
what?
I'm trying to sort of convert that because here, I mean, our mechanics are legendary. You take something to the garage and it's, oh mate, that's going to be expensive. Or well, we might be able to do something.
Mm-hmm.
I wondered if it was kind of the same thing over there.
It's sort of, kind of, almost the same thing.
Well, we still haven't got a Kristin. What I'm going to do is I'm going to quickly bung the link back in the event, see if anyone wants to jump in and join us.
Okay.
But I'll bring it up. Tina, I know we had a couple of discussions this week about, social and where it all fits in stuff. And Tina, well, it's really struck me as somebody who is working really, really hard on social media, who hopes there's a point to it, but maybe isn't quite so sure. Yeah, well, she thinks she's getting results for it, but my concern for her was that she's spending a lot of time. This is somebody who, when I said if you're spending more than 10 hours a week, forget it. You're in a part-time job at that stage. Bill, where does social media fit in an overall? If somebody's already got a full-time job and they're doing internet marketing on their own to kind of bring in the work, how much time would you say in their working week social media should be taking up?
What is she giving up? Is she not watching television? Is she not going to lunch?
From the post, it sounded like she was giving up a lot of her social life. A lot of her own time. And yeah, more than 10 hours every week going into social media in addition to blogging, which struck me as way too much. Maybe if you were the social media handler for, like I said in the post, for a whole practice, yeah, great. That's part of your job. If you're doing the online marketing, that's all you do. Then 10 hours a week on social media to amplify all of your other projects. Yeah, I can see that. 10 hours a week when that's not your job just seems way too much to me. But I wonder what your take was.
Mm-hmm. So it's a combination of Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, Google Plus.
Let's be generous and say yes. Some people it's only G Plus because that's the only platform they're using. But let's say all social media, 10 hours.
Mm-hmm. And she's trying to be very local, interact with people nearby.
I think it's establishing credibility and authority, but her focus is, a local business.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think her posts are necessarily targeting the local stuff. I think the posts are targeting, law. But yeah.
Yeah, the assumption is that the activity, no matter what, actually she believes there's a connection between it and boosting her local SEO.
Making her business stand out higher, making her blog posts get more traffic.
Making her site rank for particular keywords.
Mm-hmm. Does she link to her site from social media?
I think yes. Her blog posts.
Okay, so she posts a new blog post. She puts a link to it in Twitter. She puts a paragraph about it and a link to it in Facebook. She
Google
maybe
Plus
does
mostly.
Google Plus mostly. Is she connected to a lot of people in Google Plus?
Yeah.
So if she shares news of some type in Google Plus a link to her site, and she's got a lot of people connected to her, if they do a search for that topic, because she's connected, she shows up in search results related to that topic. So that may get more people going to those blog posts, at least people she's connected to. So there's some validity to doing that. But still, it's a matter of how much effort you actually put into that. And 10 hours seems like a lot, especially for a lawyer who may bill a lot per hour.
Yeah.
It's the difference between just the link in the thread and getting shared versus engaging in comments, conversations. Most of the time drain is in the idea that the more comments on a post, somehow this is related to the authority boost in a local search. And I'm not convinced that that's the case.
No. However, indirectly she's right. Maybe this is finally a bit of serendipity this week. If you're going to do social, you need to take the time to engage with the comments. If you don't do social at all. One of the things I most commonly see against the so-called influencers, the big names in social media, is they get to a certain point, they get to be Gary Vee, they get to be Guy Kawasaki, they get to be whoever, and suddenly they don't have time to actually engage in conversation anymore. It's about, hey, look at my latest book, you all love me, right? And then they don't engage with people who actually comment.
And the social comments they leave are fairly meaningless.
Yeah.
It's not, hey, Joe, how you doing? How's this? It's, hey, you, go read my thing.
Yeah. And
so is it meaningful from a relationship perspective, or does that set up signals that matter in terms of SEO?
It's about credibility. It's about the fact that if you don't do that, people will stop linking to you in a good context and only start linking to you in a bad. A lot of these people who succeeded through social did it on being approachable and likable and easy to engage. Let me give an example. You, Vin, have mentioned me in a few posts recently and introduced me to a few other people. Padraig is in the audience, has mentioned me, and the reason he knows me is because I'm willing to engage. I am willing to talk about even sometimes the issues other people won't. And if he mentions something, I will try to get there and take part in that conversation and give my absolute honest feedback on it. And I think that is why people are dropping the link, because I will engage, not because I'm famous. And I think a lot of people, they get to that point where they've decided they're internet famous, stop engaging. Oh, I don't have time for that. Well, that's what got you there. If you stop doing it, that's going to stop. So I think in a way she's right. If you're going to do social, you need to be prepared to spend a lot of time actually commenting and being social. This is a conversational platform, and I think that's where so many people get it wrong. I'm always going back to the Clue Train manifesto, which said, you know, the whole point is, for the first time, the internet is giving us two-way communication. And there's a lot of people who still don't get this. And people like yourself, like Todd, like Padraig, and like me, we will question something somebody says, and instead of taking this as a chance to engage, they'll, oh, you've questioned me, I don't know what to do, and they go back to megaphone mode. Even though they thought they understood social, if you don't understand that, you know, somebody will ask you a question, and sometimes people go, oh, I don't know about that at all, and you immediately, oh, no, this is off topic, I don't know what to do with questions, I'll have to go back into broadcasting. You've lost it. Bill?
Yeah, I think that's completely true. Once you become a broadcaster and stop being someone who interacts, you jump the shark. You're no longer. There's no chance for your word with serendipity to happen. There's no surprise. There's no unanticipated moments of total distraction that go in a different direction. There's that magic word again, serendipity.
Yeah.
Okay. I agree. If you're going to engage in social media and social activity, you can't just be social. You have to be part of it. You have to buy into it. You have to be willing to discuss things that other people want to talk about. The Clue Train manifesto said something along the lines of the conversation is going to happen whether you take part or not. Try to take part. You'll feel much better for it.
Well, the problem with this is that she's going to interpret, someone like Tina will interpret this as the conversation. The conversation. I think to me, social is not about SEO. I know there's benefits to it, but to me, it's about meeting people, talking to people, and so forth. So I think if you're going to be on social, it's really about the interaction. It's great to push your content out, but that's not really the primary use. It's really about meeting people, talking to people, getting beat up by Todd and other people. And so what she thinks, and what a lot of lawyers think, not just Tina, but a lot of lawyers think, is that conversation has a boosting effect to their ability to rank, socially or otherwise. And so I want to be clear on the difference, because if she ever listens, I think there's two separate things here. Is what is social for, and then what happens as a result of it. Aren't those two sort of separate things?
It's possible that at one point in time when Google came up with the idea of like an author rank or agent rank or so on, that they believed they would push things in that direction. And they would add some type of reputation score to things that you've authored based upon stuff like your social interactions. And we don't know whether or not how far fully they've integrated that into what gets ranked. It's sort of easier to say they haven't done that yet. They haven't been able to quite do it. We do have some search results that appear that are, what are those called, where they show the logo of a company next to them? and you need like organization markup to have your logo on your web page, your blog post, and they'll show those for some queries where they're supposedly based on an author's expertise, but those are limited and those are few. And that was maybe the way author rank was supposed to work. When you interacted with people on like a Google Plus, you talked about different types of topics. Google would look at the words that you wrote down and try to understand topically what you were writing about, what you were talking about, and understand what you might have an expertise in. It's hard to say that Google's actually followed through with that.
We've of course heard them say that, you know, they did try some of these things and they just could not find a way to make that signal actually enhance the results in any meaningful way, because it's very difficult, the levels that we as people apply to these things. I mean, Bill, you know, if I want to know about SEO patents, you are absolutely going to be one of the people to talk to. No two ways about it.
Right.
Now, even people who say that, there may be some who think other SEOs are above you and that, you know, you're not in the top 10 of all SEOs when they're talking big picture SEO rather than patents. I think they're wrong, but that's my take.
Yeah.
And then what about when you get into pure marketing rather than SEO? And this is the thing, you see, as you go through these levels, I remember some of the people that were at Create Site in the day, and they would constantly say that you and I were some of their two favourite marketing people, because they come to understand marketing through the form and the way that we kind of explained the bigger picture to them. But we're not thought leaders in marketing. Now, to that person we were, but that's never how we've really positioned ourselves. What does Google do in that position? You see, one person's idea of where your authority starts and stops, where your area of expertise starts and stops, is completely different to the next person's, even though they might both have known you the same amount of time.
Mm-hmm.
How does a machine even start to cope with that when, let's face it, a person can't?
Look at just hop back onto the patent train for a second. Now look at how Microsoft considers things like authoritativeness in their patents. They tend to say, well, they have a certain email address, which means they're associated with that company, and that company specializes in this subject, so therefore that's a mark in their favor towards an expertise in the subject that company specializes in. They have a profile that says that they have an educational degree in a certain subject, so that's another sign, signal, whatever, in their favor towards authoritativeness. They tend to talk about a certain topic. They use a lot of the words that are words that people commonly use when they write or talk about that topic. That's another signal that we'll pile on, and that's how a machine does it. It aggregates. It looks for collaborating evidence to prove that you know something about some type of topic. You know, when I respond to posts in Google Plus, I can take it, expand upon it, use other words that maybe haven't been used in it. Okay. Oh, okay. There's an old myth from Finland or something that involves making stone soup, huh? Okay.
It's a post I made earlier in the week that was talking about types of thought leader. And I broke it down that I thought there were 3 types. And I asked people to submit any more types they could think of. But I said that, you know, the first type is the mover and shaker, the person who does things and others then copy. And, you know, people like Steve Jobs definitely come to my mind in that kind of context. He revolutionized the way of thinking of certain things. He did it first, then he talked about it, rather than what a lot of people do, which is talk about it before it's happened and hope to get it happening. You've got the mentor types, and I'll tell you who I immediately thought of was people like John Kleinberg, who isn't, you know, the founder of a major search engine himself, but his research is in the roots of every search engine of today, in some way, shape, or form. And
it is, yeah.
He fascinates me. He may not go down in most people's idea of you know, who people in information technology are, who people in information retrieval are, but we know him and we absolutely acknowledge his place in it. I said that mentors don't tend to get the recognition, so they're the ones that, when people say they want to become a thought leader, that's usually not the kind of thought leader they want to be. And I think your father, Bill, was that kind of thought leader. He understood his product, and he talked quietly often with people about better ways that they could use, it was plastics, wasn't it?
Right.
You know, better ways that they could use plastics, how they could, I remember one of the things was the trike with a big front wheel and the small one. Originally they wanted to do that with an actual bicycle wheel, hadn't they? And he was the one that suggested, well, actually, why don't you try making the wheel itself out of plastic, which
Make,
you know,
make the whole thing out of plastic, right?
Yeah. Now, to me, that's the mentor type. He didn't get the credit. He didn't have a piece of the action. They didn't pay him for, you know, for that.
No.
But his contribution to the plastics industry is huge and unspoken.
Mm-hmm.
It was acknowledged within it, I know. But that to me is a mentor type, and you know, I love the mentor types, I do. And then there was the third kind, and I called these the stone soupers, because there's two massive ways of taking this. If you know the story of stone soup,
right,
it's, you know, the people who say, oh, we're going to make this magic soup out of stones, and people get kind of interested, and they con all the people into giving them the ingredients that make a soup. But is it a con? Because in a way, you know, they've got this vision of soup, they promised the village there's going to be soup, and at the end there's soup. They've provided the soup that didn't exist before. So there is a level of honesty to it and a level of dishonesty to it. And you know, I love this kind of stuff. I quite like the storytellers and the charlatans of the world. One of my favourite stories in science fiction, it's what started me as a marketer, was a story by Robert Heinlein, The Man Who Sold the Moon. It was a short story, and it is this real huckster type, conning everybody that he's going to make this moonshot because he wants to do it, and he's tricking them into supporting it, into making it happen. I think sometimes visionaries have to do that. It's easy to have a vision, but it won't come about, especially if you don't have the resources to do it, unless you can get other people to buy into it. So there's two sides to that, but I call these the stone soup thought leaders. Whether their ambition is great or not, they're selling a product that actually doesn't exist, but it will if enough people buy into it. Hey Todd, glad you could join us.
Hi. Vin!
How are you? What have you been up to this week?
Busting Vincent's balls.
Well, somebody else keeps busting my chops too. I'm glad we're not showing these comments. Boy, would I love to get my physical hands on him.
There you go, Paddy. That sounded like a dare to me. Get in here. So, I know you've been writing like mad, because I've been trying to keep up with actually commenting and replying to some of it. My God, you write at some speed, man.
I write a lot and read twice as much.
Yeah. Yeah,
Still
and
is.
work. How the hell do you manage this? I mean, do you
20-hour days.
Yeah, I can believe it.
There's time for rest, and that's when you're in the grave.
Will somebody tell him I was chewing gum, not eating? Jesus. Ay.
Oh, there you go. He's claiming that you're part of his branding campaign now, Todd. If you actually look carefully, Todd is running the full Zestin skin coloring, doubling colour scheme.
I'm okay with that. I like the color scheme.
Yeah.
It's better than blood on the sidewalk red.
Well, yeah, you could point this out, but some people seem to like their red, and it ties in with the G+. After all, somebody gets a lot of comments for their G+ pillow. I can't believe what a star the G+ pillow has become. I mean,
just wait until that sucker starts animating. You know it's coming. It is coming. Okay, it's robotically infused. There, and Vince puts his hat on. There we go.
Yeah.
Hey, Patrick,
it doesn't quite go on that big head, though. It's perched on the top.
It really doesn't, does it?
You notice that? It's not quite a fit. That's why it's on the wall and not my head.
I wondered if there was a sign of elephantitis, but now we have proof.
Exactly.
Quantifiable proof. Oh, I'm sorry. That word is trademarked. We can't talk about that.
We cannot mention the elephantitis in the room.
That's right. That's right. We can't. Heaven forbid.
What's sad is my own mother called me Mr. Magoo. In case it's not right. This is a complex that you people are just feeding.
Yeah. Yeah, it happens.
yeah, it just happens. One of those random things. Yeah, I know.
David would tell us it's serendipity.
Yeah, it is. Happenstance.
I had to jump on that this week. I don't know if you saw it, Bill, but David, who we normally get on very, very well with, and like his vision, he wrote, or rather did, a video post about serendipity in semantic search, which started off really well, and there's the definition of serendipity, and then completely ignored the definition of serendipity to me, because it talks about looking for it and engineering it.
And relevance.
You can't do that. That's what makes it not serendipity. That's what makes it opportunity. That's what makes it...
okay, in fairness, and it's something to consider, okay? Languages are evolving, which means the interpretation of words will evolve. So what was viewed as a definition for semantic 5 years, 10 years, 20 years ago will effectively change as each day goes on. Now, is it being skewed? Is it being manipulated as more people think of semantic to mean one thing when it originated as something entirely different? Hard to say.
Yeah, and I hate it because, let's face it, serendipity is a lovely word. It's a fantastic word. And part of what I love about it is so specific. It's got to be unasked for and unsought.
So is sly, right?
Sly is a wonderful word. It's massively underused these days. Yeah.
So is glib.
Oh. Glib I see a lot, so therefore even though the word doesn't get used to, I don't miss it. Glib goes into every marketing campaign somewhere down the line, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. It does. I'm trying to think. I'm looking at Vince's face and going, what's the My Little Pony phrase he likes so much?
Let's get Patrick involved here in the only way he's going to be. Using the latest in serendipity techniques, we can propel your brand to news. I expect to see the company offering this any day. I really do.
It already is.
He just needs to get a hobby and some different colored socks. That's all I'm going to say.
Oh, I like the socks. And he's got the hobby. It's you, Vince.
Yeah, no kidding.
and furniture removal, because that's been going very well. As well recently.
And what? I didn't understand it. Why didn't he just Google the answer? I mean, it's this great big semantic engine, right? It's driven to understand natural language. Take a picture of it, speak the natural language. Irish is now in Google Translate. So, hey, I have a broken couch. Won't fit through the door. What's the best solution? Hello. It works, right?
Wait a second. Irish might be in the web. We're talking about a whole nother language.
I must admit, it wouldn't occur to me to Google how to get a sofa through a door.
Why not?
Because I've got this thing called spatial awareness, and I can work it out.
Yeah, but have you ever heard of, what is it, Wolfgram Alpha? I mean, geez.
You just got to watch. There's an episode of Friends that where they had this very same dilemma.
How you
All
do
about
it?
the pivot.
Yeah, but no, you know, I heard the story there was quite reasonable. He knew perfectly well how to get the sofa through the door, but he saw it there on its side. It reminded him of a song that he thought I would know, so he put it in there. And the song was Right Said Fred, old Bernard Cribbin song. YouTube it. It's a great old classic song. Made me think of my father, who loved that kind of stuff. And it sparked several conversations this week that we've all kind of enjoyed, because we've been talking about the things that brought up, the Goons, the Monty Python sketches, you know, all similar sorts of humour.
Mm.
Again, the kind of semantics that Google is struggling to kind of realise. And I think YouTube shows where they're doing that quite well. I loved the fact that one of the songs you posted the other day, Todd, reminded me of another song, and there it was in the sidelines. No, somebody had shared the song with you. And it was The Man from La Mancha,
Mm-hmm.
To Reach the Unreachable Star.
Mm-hmm.
And in the side, down the video suggestions to go and look to for that was Lee Marvin from Paint Your Wagon, Wandering Star.
But I'm really not so convinced that any of that is semantic web technology or anything more than quite basically, you know,
Pattern matching.
some advanced querying. Okay. Nah, we're still a few years out.
We are very much at pattern matching.
Yeah, and they've gotten very good and very fast at it. I mean, the technology's been there, and it's been getting faster.
I'll give this over to Bill in a minute, because he is up on most of the research on semantics in search, but I know you keep up on semantics as well, Todd, so I'll just let you two geek out for a while.
Mm-hmm.
But pattern matching is kind of what our minds are doing in the first place to determine. So, you know, I talk about recipe. Now, I could be talking about cookery. I could be talking about a plan for something, because you know, that's the way we've expanded the word. There doesn't necessarily have to be an actual list of ingredients for food. It could be a recipe for success, or a recipe for something else, a recipe for disaster. So I'm going to look for other words very quickly that will give me a clue as to whether it's going in there. And that's where semantics is at the moment, but that's what we do as people anyway, isn't it?
Yes and no, because you also base it off of relevance. Let me ask you this, and I've had this discussion a couple of times. If you are 50 years old, like I am, how much of your 2 to 5 year age span, your age when you were 2 to 5, do you remember? 1 or 2 events? 5 events, maybe? Not much. More recent, you'll remember more relevantly. Okay, so semantic systems have to be built off of that, and they have to be built off of relevance. And yet, if I say, I'm looking for a transparent liquid, what could that mean? Without any other relevance, the pattern matching just skews out 10 gazillion different things. Now, it could mean I'm talking about water, it could mean vodka, but what if it's not the right kind of vodka? Now you've got errors in the code again. Exactly. It is fuzzy logic, and fuzzy logic still has a lot of work that needs to be done.
Yeah. Well, he was mentioning the Muppets earlier, so I think he actually means fuzzy logic. Waka waka!
Yeah, there you go.
That's where he's at, you know.
There you go.
So, Bill, how far have they come at the moment from the patents you've seen into actually getting more semantic understanding, really, rather than just quite superficial?
One of the difficult parts of addressing that is the fact that a lot of times Google needs to take a query, something somebody says, and try to translate it into natural language, and try to understand what's meant by the different parts of a word or phrase or conversation before it can try to find things that are related to it, relevant to it. And relevance by itself isn't a very good signal because it ignores how material something might be, how important it might be. What we were mentioned a few minutes ago about trying to remember something at age 50 when you were 2 and not being able to remember much. Well, it's probably not as material or as important because it's so far in time, it's so distant.
And yet an event from that age could be dramatically relevant that carries on for decades.
Right. When the guy's in a courtroom charged with murder, and they bring in his second grade teacher to give a character reference, it doesn't seem like it's all that important that that teacher gives that reference because it was so long ago.
And yet it could establish a pattern that could, again, be shown typically through a period of time that could be relevant on someone's going to, I don't know, the death chamber, a firing squad. I mean, they're extremes, but when you're designing code work, you have to allow for the extremes, otherwise the code breaks, and you have to always analyze the extremes.
When a judge, when a jury is weighing evidence, they don't look at each piece of evidence as if it's the ultimate clue. It's a combination of all the pieces that fit together.
Right.
So you're right there. It's just that when something seems that immaterial because it's just that old, it may not even get testified. It may not be brought out because a trier of fact may say, yeah, that was so long ago, let's ignore that. Move on to the next thing. Mm-hmm. So Google is, to a degree, like a trier of facts, like a trier of evidence. You're trying to weigh each piece and say, is that material enough? Now, we've seen Google use PageRank to try to determine whether or not something's important or material. And when we, in older SEO ranking, we've talked about relevance of individual words and importance as a combined type of thing. And it's when you combine different types of signals like that, hopefully you're going to get something stronger than if you just use one type of signal that may be filled with noise.
Well, and that's, and Bill, maybe you can appreciate it. That's where the semantic web right now is still, again, back in its infancy, because a lot of people, and I had this discussion today, think that the semantic is just Google, and it's not, because there's semantic technology in all sorts of both private and public systems. Mm-hmm. So if you have the semantic engine as interpreted by Google, it doesn't necessarily match that as interpreted by, say, Microsoft, or semantic natural languages interpreted by, like the Siri voice recognition systems in Apple. And what about the private ones? How are you going to get them all to connect? Because right now, you've got 300 little islands floating around in the world saying we're all semantic. Well, in essence, they're kind of right, and yet they're not connecting.
Mm-hmm. There's a project going on at Berkeley called FrameNet. Right. And the idea is that certain words tend to be used in certain contexts. Like cooking. A knife in cooking may mean one thing. A smell in cooking may mean one thing. It means something completely different when you talk about painting and a smell. Because paint that smells really bad, as opposed to food that smells really good. So the words have completely different meanings when you put them in different contexts. They have different relationships with one another. So yeah, you're right about there being lots of ways to describe and define what semantics actually mean, and there are a lot of different little projects going on. How do you put them all together? Microsoft has a knowledge base, you've never heard of it, or chances are you've never heard of it. It's called Probase, and it's supposedly one of the biggest concept style knowledge bases out there. It was put up on a Microsoft website. It's available for use and download and all that about 3-4 years ago, but you can actually download it. And I'm not sure whether or not anybody's really using it.
Yeah.
But the fact that it's huge, it covers a lot of stuff. It talks about how different words are related to one another. I'd like to see it. I'd like to see maybe somebody using it.
Let me bring Jim's point up here, because I think it gets back into a broader point before Vin dozes off there. One of the first steps on semantic for the search engines, out of all the crappy stuff, who the heck is a good writer worth listening to and adding weight to? Who should it boost on prior record? And this is something that I know we kind of talked about before, Bill, and it's kind of the whole thing. Yeah, it can be a signal, but what's that classic disclaimer? Past performance does not always guarantee future. Just because somebody wrote a great book doesn't mean the next one's going to be as good. And it certainly doesn't mean that 5 books down the line they're going to be brilliant. Malcolm Gladwell, Tipping Point. Fantastic. Yeah. But a lot of people have said that since then, not so much.
Google came out with something today or yesterday about improving medical results in the knowledge and in knowledge panels, and they've entered into a partnership with Mayo Clinic. Now I have a friend who says that the Mayo Clinic material is like the Reader's Digest of medicine, and if we're not using a source like the CDC, we're getting a homogenized, made for public consumption type medicine that may not actually be as accurate as we want.
Welcome to Google's version of WebMD.
Right. So.
And how does that relate to anybody sitting in the UK?
It doesn't necessarily solve the medical problems. It doesn't help solve them. It may give you a clue so you can ask somebody who actually knows, like a doctor. But
it may actually make things a lot worse, because there's a lot of hypochondriacs already. They Google one symptom, they find the worst possible disease that's got it, and that's what they've now got. And
just throw a disclaimer at the bottom.
I'll give you an example that my partner Sharon sees at her work. She works in the courts, and every day now there are people walking into court who've decided they want to represent themselves, and they've done a little bit of research by Googling things on the internet. So in they come to court and say, I'm a citizen of the realm, I refuse to give I'm a free man of the realm. Yeah, that's not law. Yeah, and that one's American law. Good luck with that. Yep. And, we have actually got people now trying to defend themselves in court based on research they've done online where they couldn't even find out where the law came from.
Right, but that's been happening longer than there's been a web.
Yeah,
it has. I worked for the courts back then, and people would come in with 30, 40, 50, 100 handwritten pages declaring them citizens of the constitutional United States with all the rights that that endows, and
And,
some of them were pretty far out there.
and in the U.S., they are allowed to do that, and of course, a judge then makes a determination of whether or not to appoint someone not as a representative, but as a guide. And what happens if you basically screw up your own defense? Then can you appeal saying that the judge allowed me to defend myself and I was painfully unaware of, I don't know, Westlaw access? Because realistically, I should have access to Westlaw if I'm defending myself.
This is always the thing. I think the whole point is to make people sign a thing saying, yeah, I have understood that I would be better, represented by a professional, and I have chosen to represent myself. That's it. You've signed it away. Of course, you're then going to get people.
That usually leads people through a colloquy along those lines, where they admit they're not attorneys. They'll probably mess up, and the court's going to give them every chance to get things straightened out with an attorney that the court's appointed to represent them in case they do something really stupid.
Yeah.
And that sounds like a terms of service. Now, the funny thing is of all the people that actually operates in that kind of world, Vincent is sitting back there. Now, he's licensed. He's had to take licensing tests to be able to do his job, and he just sits there silently. I mean, let's face it. Come on, Vince, speak up.
I'm waiting for some air.
My head, I'm sorry.
I am frankly enjoying the conversation from Bill, and only Bill, and just waiting for the moment of time where I can comment and add something enlightening to the conversation, which according to some people in Ireland is just not a possibility. So that's all I have to say.
Poke, poke, poke.
Yeah, before you say Bill and only Bill, I would remind you at this time I have the mute controls. Come on, Vid, jump in, tell us.
Like, what do you want me to say? The whole conversation on licensing and having some sort of a barrier to entry, it doesn't just apply to the legal industry, it applies to every industry. But we have to deal with it as a certified public accountant. We have to deal with it because any chucklehead can do taxes and bookkeeping. You don't need a license to do that. You need a license to do certain other things, but accountants are a little bit different than lawyers. But I did see in a state in the United States somewhere, I'm not sure which state, somewhere in the West, there's actually a state law being crafted or drafted that suggests you can practice law without being a member of the bar, without having an education in law. Try to imagine that.
So it used to be, many years ago.
Yeah, I don't think it's safe.
Yeah.
Look, here's the thing. It's not to say that everybody with a license is competent, ethical, or has standards, but there has to be, in certain industries, there has to be some benchmark at least. I mean, if anybody can be a doctor, what's the standard? What's the risk for society? If someone could say, yeah, I can operate on your brain, no problem, come on over, and they give you a scotch and they got a knife. There's got to be some standard, which we see in marketing. There's no standard. The only standard is what someone is willing to say they're qualified to do. People believe them.
Yeah, it's something we've struggled with in this industry. Is for years people have been saying, oh, it should be regulated, and it should. The problem is that marketing is part science, part art, and it is because science is true whether or not people like it. Psychology isn't. Psychology really has the Heisenberg effect, where by trying to use psychology on somebody, you change the outcome. It's much more an art. It's about how you make people feel, how people are going to understand what you're presenting, and it's an art because people are very, very different. Not all people are exactly the same.
There's only one problem I have with that, and that is that any decent trial lawyer, any decent trial lawyer will tell you that there's both the law and the art of trying a case. I mean, you can see this with if you've seen any trial, I mean, the really good trial attorneys, they bring a lot of artistic personality or approach. And it's actually not that much different when you're practicing as a certified public accountant, where people think it's pretty much black and white, cut and dry. No, there were certain tax accountants, for example, that could play with the code in a very artistic way. Medicine's a little bit different, but if you, not to reference a TV show, but I reference the show House only because medicine can be practiced as somewhat of an art form, you know, where you start thinking out of the box and creatively. What I think the license does is it gives a certain benchmark of intelligence, and at least in public accounting, what the license stood for was somebody could work hard and had a baseline level of intelligence in order to pass a certain test. Whether or not they were good as a CPA or not is the next level. That's kind of what I'm thinking about. I don't think it's a cure-all.
Exactly. So what they're doing in those professions, medical and legal, is kind of ignoring the artistic and saying they know the baseline technology. They understand the materials.
Yeah.
Yeah, I suppose we could eventually get to that.
Don't they also understand the art? Because if you're like an attorney, okay, if you violate the bar laws, you're put in front of a review by other lawyers who you will argue your case, they will interpret it, and based off of an ethical standard. Did you take what was accepted and challenge it? Was it worth the challenge? Was it not? Then should you be disbarred or sanctioned? Medical, they do the same thing except they call it experiments, and you sign off on it. Okay, I mean, what was barbaric 100 years ago, some of it still might be, and some of it now is accepted medicine. So they tested those boundaries. There would be some that would argue psychology is a science. Well, if you look at it from a biological standpoint, it could be a science. But a marketer is not looking at biology. They're looking at persuasion and oral arguments and written arguments. Maybe so.
We do have here, I don't know what you've got in the US, I'm sure you've got some bodies that are similar, but we in the UK have a Chartered Institute of Marketers.
And they do in the US. In fact, Vincent and I have talked about it. But again, without any teeth, what does it mean? It just means
the American Association of Marketing. I think it's a little bit different, probably a lesser. I don't know actually. The Chartered Association seemed like a little bit more monitoring, if you will. I don't know, a little bit more official, but yes, it's similar organization. Sorry to interrupt, Todd.
But I mean, it's something. How many marketers out there on Google Plus or elsewhere, anywhere, are going to turn around and say, here's my logo? No, they're more interested in, I've done this, and I'm going to put this link to Forbes, to this magazine, to that magazine, to this magazine. What they don't do is put a link saying, hi, I'm a member of the American Marketing Association, and this is my code of ethics. How often will you see that compared to, I just made a new, post on, like I said, Forbes, Business Week, whatever.
Well, it's funny. The code of ethics is the piece of the professional licensure that's important. Not only do you get indoctrinated into it, but it's sort of a requirement that you follow it, and there's really harsh penalties if you don't. But I was going to ask Ammon Johns the question about artistic. As you guys were talking, I was thinking that no matter what the profession is, at a certain level of competence, you shift from following the rules to artistic expression. And so I think that in any industry, at some point, even in the SEO industry, to me, what separates you guys from the hack is the hack follows a protocol, whereas you view the protocol as sort of a tool set that you can get creative with. And it's at that certain level of competence. You see it in sports, right, where a guy in professional golf or basketball, they have a certain flair based on a certain level of competence that it then becomes part of them. Music, for example, even though it's artistic, there are a lot of musicians who are very mechanical, very rule-based. They reach a certain level and then they become an artist, And I think competence is one of those things that drives artistic expression, no matter what it is.
Bill's got a comment on that in a moment, but what I say is it's a lot like writers. First, you learn the rules so that you know how and when to break them. And when you are trying to make a creative point, that is exactly the point. Here's all the stuff you know. Here's the creative way I'm twisting that to make you see this point clearer.
That's right.
Here's how I'm deliberately breaking your expectations to make you pay attention in the right place. Bill?
Can I say one thing on that before Bill? Bruce Lee, the martial artist, said, be formless. And he made a big mistake, because what happened was there was an army of martial artists who never studied the form. You can't jump to artistic expression until you understand the rules. And that, I think, is a big problem in and around marketing and sales in general, is that people don't study the core foundation. They jump right to artistic expression.
Yeah, be formless like vodka, wasn't it? That was the
yes, it was vodka.
Bill.
There's a jazz musician. I'm gonna divert from the ethics to this. There's a jazz musician who wrote on liner notes how he learned how to improvise and how to play new music, and he said we started listening to classical music. We started figuring out this is where the French horns come in. This is when the timpani player plays. This is when the flutes come on. The reason why is because it creates different moods and flows through the music. And this was a guy who's known for jazz, not classical music, but he started listening to classical music and how all the different parts fit together. To learn how to create and improvise and so on.
It's a foundation. It's in jazz. It's a foundation of sound. But like in anything else, there has to be a foundation for you to take and then express yourself. And with that particular example, you're learning how different sounds interact with each other, which is really what a jazz player does in real time. They're creating a sound across a harmonic backdrop, and they have to understand how those sounds function against each other. And Bill Evans, actually, he's a piano player. You may or may not have ever heard of him. I don't know. He did Take 5 was his biggest, one of his biggest hits. But he actually has a great video out there from one of his old educational videos where he talks about what does it take to learn jazz. And he makes this point very boldly. He says a lot of people sit down and they just start banging out notes, thinking that that's jazz. Well, it isn't. There's no foundation. There's nothing that locks it into whatever song. They just think that it's a bunch of notes in free form, right? That's not what it is, and I think that's a problem in any industry. And one of the things that barrier to entry does, that licensor, is it gives at least some foundation of knowledge and skill. Very similar to something like earning a black belt. When you're a first degree, that's when you start learning. It's not that you're a master or an expert. You've now said, I have a foundation on which I can build to become that master or expert. That foundation matters, and I think we don't see a lot of it in certain industries.
Yeah. Well, we're actually past time, but I've absolutely enjoyed this week, and I think I'm quite happy to carry on talking in the green room. If anyone wants to jump in as we go off air, you're welcome to. The link is still in the event. But for us, for this week, I think that's our bit. Bill, want to say goodbye?
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Kristin?
No question.
Todd?
See ya.
And Vin?
Good evening.